Now, some Twitter users are up in arms about having their accounts suspended for violating its spam and manipulation policy, among other rules. So if you've been using your Twitter account to promote your goods and services, or you've been using trending hashtags to promote your goods, you could be on Twitter's watch list. But is it really all that simple? We're joined by editor-at-large at My Broadband, Jan Vermeulen, to discuss this matter with us further. Jan, a very good morning to you. Is it really all that simple?
So it's difficult to piece together exactly what's happened here. This is quite a recent thing. Twitter has not got back to me with an explanation about what happened. However, looking at some of the speculation on Twitter from those who have been looking into the accounts that have been suspended, it does seem to be people who have been offering to promote goods and services for a fee through Twitter, but that in itself is not necessarily against Twitter's policies. So I suspect that what's happened here is that Twitter has cracked down on people who violated its platform manipulation policy. In other words, people have been trying to farm likes and artificial retweets and that sort of thing on promoted content, perhaps, or overly inflating their follower numbers, artificially inflating their follower numbers to be able to charge more for promotions, that sort of thing. And this might be what Twitter has taken a dim view of and has started suspending people for.
But what does this then mean for those who really earn a living from this entire space in terms of promotion and bloggers and so forth?
Yeah, so anybody who has been using the platform organically, anybody who has not been trying to manipulate the platform to grow their follower base or to make it look like there is more activity on a post than there really is, should be fine. In this particular case, and it's telling to me that in this particular case, people have been creating new accounts rather than trying to get their old accounts restored. No one is saying Twitter has suspended me and it's unfair. Help me get my old account back. The tweets are all, Twitter has suspended me. Here is my new account. Please follow me here and I'll follow back. And that to me tells me that people who were suspended know full well that they were doing something to game the system and that they had been caught.
And what can people do to recover their actual accounts?
Sure. If there has been a mistake and your account has been suspended erroneously, then there is a process on Twitter's website that you have to follow. There's a form that you have to fill in. So if you just search for Twitter account suspended or something similar, that'll take you to the Twitter website, and you'll need to fill in a form there to try and explain to Twitter that there's been a mistake and that they need to restore access to your account.
Well, Jan, why exactly are we seeing an increase in, people's accounts being suspended, sometimes unprovoked? I mean, we saw it dramatically happening with US President Donald Trump at the time.
Sure. The suspension of Donald Trump's account, I think, was a long time coming. After repeated violations of the Twitter terms of service, he was finally suspended, and so he had immunity from that for so long because he was the U.S. president. And I suspect that the likes of Twitter and Facebook regret only that they hadn't enforced their policies sooner and prevented him from inciting the attack on the Capitol as he did. What's also interesting is what's happening in India at the moment, where Twitter is in extremely hot water for suspending the accounts of activists and protesters, in line with what the Indian government has been demanding. So, it's anti-government protests, anti-Modi protests, and even the accounts of journalists have been suspended or had been suspended, and it caused tremendous backlash against Twitter. They walked the decision back, and then the Indian government took them on again, and they suspended a whole bunch of accounts again. Twitter is walking a knife's edge in India during these anti-government riots.
With that, I mean, that process entailed 500 users suspended in India with the request made by the Indian government. Surely that is concerning when it comes to issues like press freedom, freedom of speech.
Yes, and in fact, that's why Twitter walked back its decision. So it unbanned a whole bunch of those accounts and said, they don't want to infringe on people's freedom of speech. And then the Indian government came back and said, no, but this is exactly the same as what happened in the United States with the January 6th attack on the US Capitol building. And, you banned Donald Trump. And so you should be acting in exactly the same way here to prevent people from rioting and destroying a government building here in India. And so, Twitter is really in a difficult position in India, and it shows you the challenge that comes with a private corporation ultimately having control over the public commons where we meet and gather together and speak. Is that the rules and the values from one society might not translate to another one. They're now in a difficult position where they effectively have to enforce or have to choose between going with the demands of a government or going against that and trying to enforce people's freedom of expression.
What does this then mean for Twitter, Facebook in terms of its business model? Do you think there should perhaps be a rethinking of the scope of the business model and what exactly is acceptable and what isn't, and where the social media apps can in fact intervene?
So in Twitter's case, their business model is fairly straightforward, and I don't think this affects that at all. In terms of how they charge for advertising and the kind of ads that are allowed on the platform and so on. Facebook, an entirely different story, as it was it was taken on about the fact that it accepted advertising money from the Trump campaign and allowed the Trump campaign to run misleading political ads without it going through the exact same fact-checking process as any other ad on the platform might. Political ads were on Facebook were given this exemption compared to other ads, and they were taken on about that in Congress. And when finally the whole thing exploded and blew up in everyone's faces, that's when they kicked Donald Trump off of the platform. After Facebook were only too happy to take his money, to be cynical about it. Only after that did they then kick him off. After the Capitol attacks. So in terms of the business model, Facebook is probably in a trickier spot than Twitter is, but they are certainly in a spot where they've got to figure out how they are going to deal with the fact that they have become monopolies over what I call the public commons. And with that comes tremendous responsibility. And it's something that they'll have to rise to. This is unfortunately not something they can wash their hands of.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much. Interesting conversation. Jan Vermeulen, editor at large at My Broadband. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for your time.